Eagles Entertainment.
Welcome, Eagles everywhere, to the Eagles Insider Podcast, presented by Lincoln Financial Group. Eagles Insider Dave Spadaro with you as we look ahead here. Super Bowl 55 right around the corner. Tampa Bay and Kansas City. Who you got? I guess I go with Kansas City, although it's so hard to count out Tom Brady, isn't it? What he did against Green Bay and what he's done throughout his career, truly awe-inspiring. I just don't like the guy. Looking for a great game on Sunday in Tampa, Florida. What we have for you here on the Eagles Insider Podcast, very, very special episode. Eagles Chairman CEO Jeffrey Lurie spent, nearly 2 weeks looking for a new head coach and interviewing, about a dozen candidates. Exhaustive interviews. Well, what happens in those interviews? What do they talk about? Why Nick Sirianni to be the 21st full-time head coach, 25th head coach in franchise history if you include the interims who've served for the Eagles. What made Sirianni stand out? We're going to find out right here exclusively on the Eagles Insider Podcast. Chairman CEO Jeffrey Lurie joins me. Jeffrey, thank you so much for joining me here on the Eagles Insider Podcast. Excited to talk to you about Nick Sirianni. I had a chance to speak to him. He's really dynamic, very genuine, down to earth. Love talking to him. So I want to hear about the process in a very unusual world in 2021. What was it like going through this?
Well, it was very intense. Before it all, I was wondering how would this be in COVID and whether we could accomplish what we needed to accomplish, which was physically being present for long, intense interviews. And, we were able to. We interviewed quite a few people, and the average interview length probably was about 8 hours. And it revolves around so many aspects, from leadership, football IQ, ability to communicate. How are you going to show accountability with your players, your coaches? How are you going to work with everybody? How dynamic? How comfortable are you in your own skin? How do you see the future in terms of offenses, defenses? Where's the league going? Sort of an analysis of every position, of what you want in a player, but probably most centered around leadership and ability to communicate and be there and earn trust from the players, the coaches, and the staff. I think that was it. And literally, to get to the bottom of it, it's probably an 8, 9, 10-hour process, Dave. And sometimes it's in a setting where you have some key executives that were there with me, and other times it's one-on-one. I made sure to spend at least, an hour with each candidate, just one-on-one, and see how they would fit as the most dynamic and best possible coach for the Eagles. And it's a grueling process every day, 8, 10 hours, and then sometimes you have some casual time, lunch, dinner, and you try to really get to know the person. And in Nick's case, brought him back a second time and got to know him even more. And, just extremely excited by the many, many aspects that he will bring.
You mentioned the number of candidates, reportedly as many as a dozen people you interviewed from all different backgrounds, offense, defense, etc., experience levels, all different. Why was that being so thorough? Why was that so important to you?
So I felt going into it, and every circumstance is different. We were very open-ended to really try to find the best possible head coach. And although, I guess I've always leaned towards the offensive side of the ball, you've seen too many great head coaches that came from defense as well. And I just thought it was important for us to interview the best possible candidates, whether it was offense, defense, new head coaches, those that have been head coaches, make sure it was a diverse search, both in their experiences and in their backgrounds, their race, everything. I mean, it's just, we wanted to be as open-ended as possible, but it was, I guess you could say, thorough, but at the same time, intense. It's not just expanding your search to numbers. It's to make each candidate have a terrific experience and have that intensity of the interview. And by the way, the interview is part of it, but probably over 50% of it is all the background work we do. So our process, and I think it might be similar with other teams, but I really don't know, is we have virtually every department head at the Eagles reach out to their counterparts where each candidate has been working for the last 5, 10, 15 years and really interview their counterpart with difficult questions and come to a conclusion. And then we really read and look at all those interviews to see how they were to work with, how innovative they are, how open they are, how dynamic they are, what kind of leaders, how do they treat the assistants in the building, how do they treat the kitchen workers, every possible aspect, because that's important to our culture. We have a culture where there's no room for condescension or superiority, and it's very inclusive, and I always want it to be.
So Nick Sirianni is the man. How did he interview? What stood out to you about him? And when did you know, Jeffrey, that he was your guy?
Well, it's interesting. So, Dave, we had a lot of good candidates. I got to tell you, this was like very surprising to me in one way, in that there are a surplus of excellent candidates. I think multiple candidates that we interviewed are going to be head coaches in the NFL in the next 2-3 years. So with Nick, I think it was just a combination of many things. One, though, which I always look for right away, is the candidate absolutely comfortable in their own skin, because with that, they can be genuine. And in today's world, whether it's business, sports, entertainment, virtually anything, I think if you're genuine and you're able to communicate in a way that earns people's trust, you have to earn trust. And I think good leaders earn trust. They don't assume it by their position they're in or the new position they've just accepted. It's an ability to earn trust at every level of the organization, and especially with the players and coaches. And to do that, you have to genuinely care about the lives of those who work with you. And that is a very key element. It's one of many. But Nick was absolutely terrific in terms of that comfort level and his caring. Every reference we did was how much he cares for his players, his coaches, and everybody. And that earning of that trust is important. Football IQ, off the charts. We would go through hours of very detailed grinding, because Nick is a grinder in a great way. He has built his resume through game planning, through working with position groups, coordinating obviously at the Colts, but it's the culmination of a very detailed process where he looks at defenses and tries to maximize, exactly what he wants to accomplish each game on offense. And we also interviewed people that had been in on game planning with Nick. And of course, that is an important aspect of being a head coach. It's not just the ability to communicate. It's not just the ability to earn trust. Those are prerequisites for me, but you have to have a very high football IQ. It's a fast-changing game, and defenses will adjust, offenses will adjust. Where's the game going, and can you reach into your repertoire of football IQ to both adapt and be dynamic? And those were just two of the many elements with Nick. Work ethic, of course, but that was a big part of it.
Perhaps you just answered this, but this will be Nick's first time as a head coach at any level. This is not an obstacle to you. Why?
Yeah, no, I think as you saw in this hiring cycle, not just for us, but all 7 head coaches had never been an NFL head coach before. Urban had been a head coach in college, but all the other candidates, including Urban, have never been a NFL head coach. I've never shied away from that. I thought that Andy Reid would be an awfully terrific head coach. Never had even been a coordinator. never call plays. Chip had early success with us, and Doug, wins a Super Bowl in his second season. So I never felt that was the part. If you're able to have a high enough football IQ and had studied what does it take to be a good leader and all the responsibilities of being a head coach, which is very different than being a coordinator or a head coach in college or whatever. I think, though, with Nick, you could see the wheels going, and he's an absorber. He's an absorber that can add to his already high football IQ and figure out how best to maximize what he has. And that's a big part of it.
You described the meetings as intense. You described Nick as a grinder, but I wondered, was there a certain personality that he carried forth in the interviews that you had with him that really stood out to you? I mean, I found him to be very thoughtful, very gracious in his answering, very considerate. I mean, what kind of stood out to you? I mean, you obviously spoke to him a whole lot more than I did.
Yeah, no, those are all aspects. The grinder is just one. I mean, that's just a prerequisite for the job, in my opinion. Warm, open, a person who thinks before takes action, somebody who thinks problems through. We were able to go through how he handled many different circumstances in his career. I think a sense of being a teacher, very important part of it. Who's going to be a great teacher? Because when you're a really good head coach, you're interacting with many positions at different times. And he may come from the offensive side of the ball, but, ask Nick about defensive back play or what to do with certain types of receivers, and he will give you a very, very thoughtful answer. So, I would, I guess, refer to him as someone who has a strong personality, somebody who will have no problem having difficult conversations with players, with coaches, with staff, emotional yet poised, and warm and open at the same time, very, very intense. And that's a great combination. That's a combination that can maximize your own ability as a coach.
Jeffrey, Nick has been coaching in the league for 12 years. He's worked with quarterbacks extensively the last 3 years with Frank Reich in Indianapolis, and they had 4 different quarterbacks throughout those 3 seasons. So he's got a really well-established reputation working with that position. How important was that to you in the decision-making process?
I would say it was a small factor. We interviewed people that were excellent coaches that had never worked with quarterbacks. We interviewed people that had worked primarily with quarterbacks. We really did a search to try to find the best head coach. So it was really, we're looking for the best head coach for the Philadelphia Eagles, the best leader, and the best person to be able to communicate and uncover and maximize, your roster now and your roster in a year and your roster in 2 and 3 years. And it'll be very different in 3 years than it will be this year. And it really was a small factor, but it's a plus. Quarterback is the most important position on the team. And you certainly wanted, whether it's an offensive coach or a defensive coach, for them to have thoughtful answers of how they would approach, in our case, 2 quarterbacks that are generally thought to have big upsides. And, that was also an interesting part of the whole interview process. We didn't delve into the quarterbacks much because everyone has to watch film. They can't give us smart answers until they've really grinded it out and watched hours and hours and years of tape. But I think the general consensus was very positive. We've got 2 quarterbacks with big upsides, and now it's a question of maximizing them.
That's really an interesting point. I think fans probably believe that a candidate comes in with a very detailed knowledge of the roster. But like you say, it's impossible to do that without really delving into it for a long, long time.
Yeah, if somebody had come in and acted like they knew the roster without having watched every single game for the last 3, 4, 5 years, I think we would have been a little jaded. It's much more the process of what will take place now in terms of Nick and his staff really reviewing what's taken place over the last multiple years at every position. And so it's really, it's the process that's now about to unfold that's important. It wasn't the process during the interview process of what would they do. It's kind of a good problem to have. We have, and now we go forward with hopefully a great path. I mean, we're awfully excited.
Jeffrey, you mentioned the coaching staff. Nick has been busy putting it together. What role might you have in recommending coaches to stay or providing some guidance on some outside hires?
Right, Dave. So I think, my role is really just to be supportive. And if he, we always encourage incoming head coach to interview the existing staff because we have a lot of good people. But you've got to find staff members for a new head coach that fit within what he's looking for. And it's a mix and match process. So all I can be is supportive for that process. I always encouraged him to not rush into it and find the best possible people for the job. You hope to have them for a while, but they should also be really good teachers and leaders. And I think, Nick has done that. And it's kind of been interesting because we, in our interview process, we had about, many coaches say who they were going to hire as their defensive coordinator if they were on the offensive side of the ball. And we kept hearing the name Jonathan Gannon. It was like, I didn't know anything about Jonathan Gannon, but I was thinking, boy, how are we gonna get Jonathan Gannon if he's so highly regarded? Maybe someone that has already reached out to him is going to get him or something. And I was just pleased to see that Nick was able to land somebody that we had all been hearing about for the last 10 days in a very, very positive way. So he I think has all the right attributes of how to put together a staff. It has to be really good teachers, number one. It has to be diverse. We want to put into our pipeline diverse candidates, minority candidates. I think in the NFL, there's not enough in the pipeline at times, and we wanted the Eagles to certainly have both offensively and defensively and special teams in the pipeline for bigger jobs. And I think that's what he's accomplishing. And he's the kind of guy that I think wants to make the most of this opportunity and surround himself with people that will both teach as hard as him, work as hard as him, and be as dynamic as him. And I think, again, comfortable in his own skin, not worried about having very smart people right next to him.
Jeffrey, in due time, we all have our fingers crossed. We'll all be back at the NovaCare complex and business as usual, we hope. What environment would you like to have on a daily basis in and around the building, in and around Lincoln Financial Field in this era?
It's all well and good that we've been able to survive on a virtual basis, Dave, but it takes away a lot of the camaraderie and the human interaction that we've always treasured. And I think one of the keys to the Eagles' success has been the family atmosphere. It's really an extension of my own family, and I treat it that way. And I'm obviously obsessed with success and bringing more Lombardis to Philadelphia. And to do that, I think you got to have the both collaboration and the consistent human interaction so that you can have those kind of discussions, sometimes easy and sometimes difficult, but difficult discussions provoke new dynamic ways of doing things. And I just think that you've got to always have that open-ended family atmosphere to provide that kind of growth for a team and for the players. I know the players have missed having that camaraderie. You've got to have that to really maximize yourself. Now, every team has been in the same position. Some have, obviously gone on to the Super Bowl, but it's for us, I really am counting on the fact that I hope, certainly by the fall, that we'll be in a much more interactive environment where there's real collaboration. And again, get back to that family atmosphere with those dynamics that create really healthy results.
Jeffrey, only a few more for you. And again, thank you so much for your time. I've really enjoyed this. When you've talked around the league about Nick, were there certain words, phrases, ideas that you heard consistently about him?
There were. It's interesting. So I guess brilliant football IQ is one that keeps coming up, whether it's Frank Reich or others that we talked to, both in the Chargers, the Colts, going back before that. Somebody who really puts the work in to become incredibly knowledgeable. And yet, I guess the other thing that the counterpart to that, or the what goes so well with that, is the ability to teach and communicate. And, in today's world, it's so important, I think, in any business to have the leaders care enough about all the employees and all the people that are working with that person and earn their trust, that they care about the people, because, you need both. You need dynamic football IQ. You need to have a presence. You need to have an edge. Nick has an edge, quite certainly. But you also got to earn the trust. And that's hard to find. And he checked all the boxes in terms of that capability. Every reference we had, every interview we did, it was how he connects to players, coaches, and everybody. And, that's part of it's part of the whole picture, but it's an important part.
I keep reading that he's a natural leader. Did you find that to be the case? Like, can you kind of tell that after talking to somebody for so long, if it's natural or if it's forced?
Yeah, I think you can. Now, that's part of the process. And, you have to sometimes rely on your gut, because you're spending 8-10 hours. You're not spending 20 days straight together or something like that. But yeah, it became really, really obvious, both from the references and the interviews we did, but more the interview as well, that natural leader who connects, who's genuine. The prerequisite, I think, of good leadership is to be genuine to start. He comes from a very, very genuine spot, and backs it up with a high football IQ. So if you're a player, you just want to be helped in your career as best as possible. And you want to be helped in your own life as much as possible. So can you trust the person, and can they put you in positions to be successful? And, Nick just, it comes across in a way that's very caring, but also in a way that's very strategic, and in a way where you have confidence that regardless of the position, if it's a wide receiver, a quarterback, a cornerback, outside linebacker, whatever, it's important to him to make sure that player is put into the best possible situation to succeed.
Jeffrey, finally here, something a little bit off track. David Culley gets hired by the Houston Texans. Yet another person who's come through the Jeffrey Lurie tree, if you will. I mean, it started with John Gruden and Sean Payton all the way through. What does all of that mean to you when you look around the league and see so many head coaches whom you've had in Philadelphia, key executives, staff members throughout the league? What does that mean to you when you kind of look at the whole picture?
Yeah, Dave, it means a lot. I'm very proud of that. I think, we have a great culture. Our culture is very coach-centric. We give a lot of responsibility to the coaches, and they grow and they thrive. And whether it's Sean Payton, John Gruden, and Sean McDermott, and the list goes on and on, obviously. Ron Rivera, we have not enough time to go through them all. So happy for David. It's not often that a coach who's earned it over the years, time after time, coaches receivers and communicates with players so successfully at age 65, I think, gets an opportunity. And I couldn't be happier for Dave, one of the real terrific guys. So when I heard that, and by the way, I heard Leslie Frazier was a finalist, and it's hard not to root for Leslie too. One of the classiest people I've ever come across in the NFL, Leslie. Sharp and terrific defensive mind. And I was really glad that those were the two finalists, and can only hire one. So I'm very happy for David.
Jeffrey, finally, Super Bowl 55, Kansas City and Tampa Bay. Your thoughts on this matchup?
Well, we're going to get to see two of the most incredible quarterbacks of our lifetime. Tom, the greatest ever, and Patrick, beyond great. And so just that alone is pretty great. Get to see Andy Reid reach for his second Lombardi, probably the second of many. And Bruce Arians coming back and doing a great job. So happy for Todd Bowles as well. Really, his defense, and one of the classiest guys I've ever been around, as in the NFL. Very happy for this matchup. I think that the world gets to see Tom Brady, Patrick Mahomes, two well-coached teams, lots of dynamic players, and two very deserving teams to win it all. And so I'm excited for whoever gets to watch this. I think we'll watch a classic matchup.
Jeffrey Lurie, thank you so much for joining me here on the Eagles Insider Podcast. I very much appreciate your time and looking forward to great things for the Philadelphia Eagles in 2021 and beyond. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Dave. Nice to be with you.
Thanks so much to Jeffrey for his time and his insights. Great stuff there. I think, again, after hearing from Coach Sirianni, hearing from Jeffrey there, I am fired up for this football team. Going to be a lot of changes, we think. Roster has some challenges, no doubt. But there is energy, there's enthusiasm, there's change, a new direction for the Philadelphia Eagles. And his name is Nick Sirianni, head coach. So we're going to keep you updated, in the know, and behind the scenes throughout the rest of this offseason. Eagles getting ready for the next step here, which is free agency March 17th. The NFL draft April 29th. So everything happening very quickly. More to come on the Eagles coaching staff. We'll have all of it for you right here on the Eagles Insider Podcast, as well as our Eagles update. So make sure you're with us for both of those podcasts. Fran Duffy's got you covered for the journey to the draft as the Eagles sit there with the 6th pick in round number 1 and need to knock it out of the ballpark. He's also got the Eagle Eye in the Sky podcast. So make sure you sign up for all of these Eagles platform podcasts so you can hear directly from the team for things like this, an exclusive interview with Jeffrey Lurie. Thanks to Peter Kelly, Ray Doyle. Thanks to Trevor Hayes for their great work putting everything together. Thanks to all of you for joining on this podcast. If you have a moment to give us a review, please do so. The link is right there in the details section of your Eagles Insider podcast library. I'm Eagles Insider Dave Spadaro. Thanks for joining me on the Eagles Insider Podcast, presented by Lincoln Financial Group. Have yourselves a great Eagles day, and fly, Eagles, fly.
E-A-G-L-E-S, Eagles!
Raise a glass to that comforting feeling of an Eagles touchdown with the all-new Broad & Pattison wine collection created in partnership with Wink, featuring a Cabernet, a Rosé, and a Chardonnay. Broad & Pattison wines are the perfect pairing for any occasion. Now you can bring the sweet taste of victory with you to a dinner with friends or to the tailgate with your game day crew. Purchase online today at PhiladelphiaEagles.com/wine to stock up and have Broad & Pattison delivered right to your door. A portion of proceeds from every bottle benefit Eagles Autism Foundation.